I'm joined by Fintan O'Toole of the 42. We're going to talk about the situation going on with the GAA and effectively, can we? I'd have a bit of a problem where people are saying the GAA need to take leadership here now. Let us know what's happening. Can't leave players waiting in the wing. But like Fintan, the way I look at it, the government don't know when things are going to go back to normal. How on earth can the GAA predict when we can have fixtures and take leadership? It's an impossible situation. So at the moment, I actually feel quite sympathetic towards them.
I kind of agree with you there, and I think there's a bit of an irony here that usually, like we spend enough time and chatting about this, about GA and fixtures and all that, and it's just criticism you're giving them for it because they're not trying to sort out a mess. But I think this is one particular situation, one particular, it's kind of unprecedented. At the start, I suppose there was a comparison made to 2001 with the foot and mouth, but that was kind of over within a couple of weeks, and they had to do stuff like, I saw yesterday across the line and we're talking about it was 19 years Easter Monday that they won the All-Ireland club title, but that was a relatively short kind of a deferral, and at least there was some kind of clarity. But this is very, very difficult to kind of get a read on the situation because, as you said, the authorities, the HSE and the government don't really know when life is going to get back to normal, let alone kind of major sport. And like there's a lot of people calling for kind of some kind of a definitive decision, but it's very, very difficult to kind of make that. And I don't think there should be, like a lot of people are saying that it's unlikely that there will be inter-county championships as we know it this year, and that may be true, and I think certainly it's kind of dawned on a lot of people that this is kind of settling in for the long haul, really. But I think there's something to not making kind of hard and fast decisions, because I do think the kind of kind of maybe sounds philosophical, the kind of hope of a better day ahead. The people around the country that are hoping to see their county in championship are hoping, whether it's on TV or maybe see a big game in whatever stadium, that they hope that they will get to see that this year. And I don't know, would it be the wisest course of action in the middle of April to suddenly decide there's not a chance that's going to happen in 2020 when you don't really know what way Ireland is going to be in the coming months.
Like, I'm sure you're hooked to the news and updates on COVID-19 and how it's affecting different places in the world. But what you keep hearing is that things where there's going to be mass crowds, that's the last thing that's going to come back. So the idea of 40,000 people in Semple Stadium, 80,000 people in Croke Park seems like that's a mile away. And obviously, to some degree, the numbers in Ireland of cases is far fewer than, let's say, France, where they've just updated the lockdown to May 11th. So, like, the idea of getting 50,000 back in a big stadium at the moment just seems like a world away. First off, do you like this idea of behind closed doors games? Like, I mean, you even see a text floating around on WhatsApp, and I mean, again, this is a dangerous thing, and I like debunking these things because it was shared in some groups that I'm in, and it was like the GAA are having a big meeting on Friday, so we know about the special congress. Championship formats and restart dates to be put out. Looks like senior hurling will be round robin still, but only provincial finalists go through to All Ireland. Minors still to go, 20s to fall. Club finals will be back to Patrick's Day next year. League called off. And this is purported to be from someone in a county board, but like, I just don't know how people could think that this is realistic. Like, who in the GAA is possibly going to know more about where this virus, where this pandemic is going, than people in the HSE? I mean, it's just not realistic.
It kind of reminds me as well, a few weeks ago when, the crisis was really kind of taking hold, there was a lot of just WhatsApps about general, stuff going around. And I mean, I presume you saw them like that, heard it from whoever, the army's going to be on the streets in the morning, get ready. And I think it was good the way the HSE came out and kind of debunked that, and a lot of news organisations have been doing some good work, and I've kind of found myself stopped getting those in WhatsApp groups. But look, I think you should take maybe a lot of WhatsApp messages that you're forwarding on in general that are purporting to be the truths, maybe take them with a grain of salt. So I think the notion of the packed, Terrace in Semple Stadium or Castlebar or Hill 16 be packed, I find it hard to see that happening this year. The variations on it, whether it's behind closed doors, like I've seen people say some suggestions, could you, I don't know, a Semple Stadium half full, but I don't know how that exactly would work. Would it be people sitting in every third seat? How would that be policed? There's kind of a lot of difficulties there. As regards playing behind closed doors, to be honest, I wouldn't be against it. I think it would do, like a lot of people are, obviously there are more important things than sport, like that kind of goes maybe without saying, but I do think it would be great for people to have something live sport to watch. Sure, it wouldn't be the same, the atmosphere would be and all that, but at least, maybe it kind of simulates conversation and debate and all that, and it kind of gets people back interested in something live again. I think one of the interesting things will be, I've seen in Germany they're talking about maybe the Bundesliga coming back at the start of May. It'd be interesting to see if there was an example elsewhere that they could then replicate and follow and see how did they manage to do it. I know it's professional sport, and there is there's kind of financial imperatives and motivations for them to kind of push on there. But I mean, similarly to the way that they're talking, the government I'd say, I think is it Austria and Denmark are starting to reopen kind of society slowly but surely over the next couple of weeks. I'm sure they're watching it there, and I wonder are sports authorities going to see who will be the first one to try and come back. And as far as I've seen, I think Bundesliga are the main one at the moment because they seem to have got a bit of a better handle on it in Germany at the moment. We see every day the Premier League talking about, this is the crunch date for it, and all the kind of financial problems with the fact that I suppose the struggles clubs are having and with the TV deals and all that. The GAA don't really kind of have those kind of issues, and they can afford to, I suppose maybe they're fortunate in the way that it's not like there's a new season has to start in August, that they can kind of afford to push it down the road. But look, yeah, I suppose kind of going back to what you were saying about the closed doors, if it had to be that, I probably wouldn't be too much against it, to be honest.
From my point of view, like even if it was closed doors and you had, for example, I'll take two teams from different sides of the country, Galway and Wexford, if they had to meet somewhere to play behind closed doors, you're still going to have people from different parts of the country. If there is a concern about spreading the virus and you can test people, but they can be asymptomatic, and then all of a sudden you've got people crisscrossing the country, possibly transmitting to each other. Do you have it on TV then? So do you have TV crews who are on location for 12 hours, 14 hours? I just don't know. I mean, if that's policeable. And obviously Germany, they have a different set of circumstances. They have a different health system. Their testing is maybe through the roof compared to ours. So
just because that's the thing, that the testing would need to improve, wouldn't it? Really, the speed of it, to kind of to stage, I don't know, Galway, Wexford in Portlaoise or whatever. I wonder, like, what I saw a stat quoted that I think you need 239 or 249 people to host a Bundesliga game if you had no fans. So that's kind of including, your physios, TV cameramen, everyone to basically stage a game, and obviously including the players. I don't know how many you would need for a GAA game to be kind of run off and say, like the fixture that you've just suggested there. But I suppose kind of going back to kind of what we were saying at the very, very start, like we're kind of doing a lot of speculating here. I think the one thing the GAA will probably need to do this week is, I don't think they can kind of fall into line with the government, who keep, and this is seems the proper way to do it, of pushing back the lockdown every couple of weeks. The GAA can't really probably go with that. Like at the moment, technically, the Munster Hurling Championship is still down to start on the 9th of May, when, like you saw last week, Kieran Kingston, I think, called for a bit of clarity. A couple of the Ulster football managers called for a bit of clarity as well. I think they need to make a definitive decision maybe now, when maybe, say, May and June is gone, for example. At least, like, it's probably not really fair on players that are, should be seeing kind of videos on social media and all that, and you've heard stories about players trying to follow these training regimes, at home and trying to do their bit, and like, I'd say it's very frustrating and probably difficult to motivate yourself to do that when you probably think it's pretty futile and that you won't be actually coming out to play your first round of the championship game whenever it's meant to be in May or June.
Yeah, I can see why you'd say that. It'd be nice to have some sort of a definite answer, and like even club teams across the country, and I'm sure your own there, Éire Óg, Kula, you are training away and trying to tip away, and a little bit you almost feel like what's the point in this? So I do understand the idea whereby you go, okay, let's just cancel May, June and July or whatever, for example. But the flip side is that's probably the easiest of the options, whereas if you just kind of say, lads, we just have to roll with it, play it by ear, like players in general are going to keep themselves fit anyway, so even if you say it's off for the next 3 months, they're probably going to still do the same training anyway. And then I know there's the idea that players and managers will want to run in of 3 or 4 weeks to prepare, but if everyone's in the same boat and you get the go ahead, I don't see the issue with 2 weeks. Everyone's in the same boat. It's not like when Dublin have a home advantage with Croke Park for every game. We're all in the same boat, and I just think we just have to roll with it. And if that means that we don't play again until November, I think the first ever All-Ireland final was played in April. The first ever Hurling All-Ireland 140 years ago, whatever it was at this stage. So like, I think you just kind of play it when you can. Even if that goes to November, December, whether it's clubs or whatever. During the club runs in the last few years, oftentimes November and December are actually all right. It's when you get around to February and March that the season seems to have shifted somewhat in terms of the weather being really bad then. So I just think the easiest thing to do is to just roll with it.
Well, I wouldn't have a problem with that if they actually said that was the strategy. But I don't think they can keep saying, look, we're going to review. If they came out now after the special Congress and said, we're going to review it on the evening of Tuesday, May 5th, because that's as we know it at the moment, I just think people will see right through that, and that will really lead to frustration. But if they said, look, we can't make a definitive decision because we don't know, we're just going to have to kind of see it as it is. But as of the moment, and look, maybe that was understandable for the first couple of times that it was till March 29th, and then it was till the recent time, the 12th of April. But I just don't think they can keep saying we're committing to these 2 or 3 week windows. If they say, look, if they say something, we're thinking, we're just going to have to follow kind of government guidance. It's very difficult to make a decision, but at least maybe communicate a bit more clearly. And I think it's a good step to have this special Congress, because it basically is removing kind of the layer of decision making, and it's based in these circumstances, and just empowering the management committee to kind of make decisions on the hoof, and that you don't have to kind of get everyone together and everyone's input and all that, and that they can kind of revamp the structures. Personally, I think the provincial hurling round robin would probably have to go. I think they will have to go to some kind of a knockout system there. They seem pretty committed, from what we're hearing, to some kind of a second chance in football, but that the Super 8s will go. Be great if they can do that. But yeah, and I suppose that there is enough kind of, like you said, going to the end of the year. I don't think that'll be a bother either. I mean, look, if people did get a handle on it, I mean, I saw, looking at other sports, there was some suggestion that November could be one of the greatest golf months ever. If you end up having a couple of majors there and the Ryder Cup, if it went back, for example, if you had October, November, a massive amount of hurling championship games, that'd be football championship games, that'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? For fans of the sport. Whether you'd be able to obviously have full houses there probably is the other issue, but I'd imagine we're probably going to see some kind of club games come back first. That would be sense of it, but it's going to be interesting as well to see kind of what way clubs are going to have to revamp. So counties are going to have to revamp their club championship structures. Probably easier in some. Say, for example, you think of Kilkenny, 12 senior hurling clubs to kind of run off their championship. But you think of Tipperary, for example. I mean, is it going to be realistic for Tipperary to have the divisional hurling structure to feed into the county structure, for example, this year? Are they going to have to go to one? Like Cork have kind of a group system. I imagine that's going to have to go. Dublin, Galway is another example of kind of very complicated one, isn't it? For the senior A and senior B hurling. So I think everyone's just going to have to get a bit creative. But I don't agree. I suppose ultimately my main thing would be to make a hard and fast decision now to say we're scrapping sport. We're scrapping GAA for 2020.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that point. Actually, even 2011, Dublin won the All-Ireland football final and got to the All-Ireland semi-final in hurling. And during April, just one group game was played. Actually, I think it was the start of May. And so there was supposed to be 2 more rounds of group games. But because things went on so long, and obviously the Leinster Championships, club championships were coming in both football and hurling, they actually just decided to scrap the group stages of the Dublin Championship. I think the football didn't have a group stage at the time, but they just scrapped the group stage and just decided to do an open draw. So where there's a will, there's a way. I still think, if possible, I'd like to play the championship in its entirety. But if that means doing it in November, December, January, I'm happy to go with it. Because if it gets around to January and we don't have the storms, which is no guarantee, but if you don't have the level of storms that we've seen earlier on this year, I'd have no problem with All Ireland semi-finals and finals being in January at Croke Park, because the pitch will be able to take it. I mean, but assuming it's not a storm.
I suppose the issue there will be that if counties aren't flexible and if the county championship doesn't change, I would imagine clubs would be up in arms if it's like, well, we took the pain and we're going to a knockout system this year where we only have one game in Kerry football or Galway hurling or whatever. And I think that would kind of heighten the sense that there's a divide and a disconnect there when in Croke Park they're trying to push it through. So I think optics-wise for that, it would look quite bad if they tried to still, push through everything and tried to have, a round-robin Munster hurling game in October, because then you're going to have loads of club players kind of sitting idle and be like, well, we've been waiting all year for games as well, lads.
But my thought would be, we don't necessarily need to start everything on time next year. So let's say everything starts 4 months later this year. Truncate the calendar as much as you can, have fewer breaks, just play it quicker and don't have these 2 or 3 week breaks for games. Then start the club a little bit later, and obviously it will end a bit later next year. So the entirety of next season is pushed back a month or two, and then just try and slowly phase it back to the right time of the year. I just think knock everything back a little bit. 100 years ago, the All-Irelands were for 1920 was played in 1921, and it just, there was a knock-on effect for a few years until eventually it caught up. I think it would be a shame to miss out on any particular season. So play the season when you can, and then just readjust and get things back where they should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that historical precedent, I'd be quite surprised if there isn't at some stage, whenever, a 2020 All Ireland hurling champion crown, or an All Ireland football champion crown. One of the other issues that I think kind of missed me, and I just saw an article about it last week, is, you know, if I suppose if Ireland kind of reopens, I suppose, and society kind of gets back up and running, but Northern Ireland maybe doesn't to the same extent. Like, you know, I know that, I think I saw last week, the kind of executives are kind of working together a little bit more closely now, aren't they, kind of on the matter? But like, just, you know, if there was different restrictions, I mean, it kind of shows, I suppose, that the complaints that were kind of being made about, like, for a while, that there was kind of maybe a lockdown in Lifford and not one in Strabane, for example, and the Donegal-Tyrone border. And I just wonder if there isn't kind of that joined up thinking on governmental level. It'd be quite difficult for the GAA to say, we're going to belt on here with whatever in Connacht, Leinster and Munster, but, you know, the same, I suppose, changes and kind of reopening of society hasn't happened in Ulster. It's just a kind of a thing that maybe might crop up down the line.